What's good, everybody? It's your boy Big Nate. Welcome to Big Nate's Book Reviews, home of the best book reviews. And today we are doing a wrap-up of books I read over the past few weeks and months, which I'm not doing reviews for, but which I nevertheless want to talk about. So, got my doobie right here. You already know the drill. We are smoking this one today in proportion to what I rate each of these individual books. So today we are smoking that proportionately for everybody. And without further ado, let's get right into it. So, while I'm sparking a doobie, I'm not even gonna say anything. I'm not. But it is interesting how I announced my Patreon. And I know Big Nate Gang fucks with me. I do. I know money is also hard to come by these days. So if you can't, I get it. But at the same time, if you want to talk to me in an empty ass Discord room, because it is in fact empty as fuck, and I'm just sitting there. If you just want to chop it up with me alone in this room, get to that Patreon. Not to mention the reaction videos and the bonus podcast episodes and the writing. I won't even get into all that because without further ado, the doobie is just about sparked. Yep, there we go. It's official, and now we are off to the races. So, up first we have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. So, this is one of those books you can't really talk about the plot without spoiling the entire thing. So, I'm gonna keep it very general, but I will just say it loosely follows this teenage girl named Mary Cat who lives with her older sister and her decrepit uncle. And the kicker is, because this is a classic, this is, as you can kind of tell by the fucking cover, this is considered to be like a classic horror novel. But one of the many things that's like interesting about this book is these motherfuckers have absolutely no contact with like anybody. They have like no human interaction except for Mary Cat, and like very rarely. And as you can imagine, and since we're talking about Shirley Jackson here, some very weird stuff is brewing within this house. And everything is not quite as it seems. I cannot elaborate, but like I said, it's a horror novel. One of the reasons we know, however, things are not as they seem, I can at least say this much, is because Mary Cat is fucking weird, among other things. Like, she is having these super, like, dark and very grotesque fantasies, which I will not elaborate into, but and she's exhibiting some very strange behavior, one might say. And she's low-key, high-key, like, delusional. So, and I'm just scratching the surface. That's to say nothing of, like, the older sister Candace and the whole family. And again, I'm avoiding, like, literally what this whole book is basically about. But one of the things I will say I liked about this, as with everything Shirley Jackson writes, is her ability to do, like, creepiness. I don't really know how else to say it besides, like, weirdness, creepiness. And she basically... And I think she does, this is particularly true of her short stories, but as well in this book, but she's just an expert at dropping these like imperceptible details that are like very weird and unnerving, but like you just kind of read over them, and it's really the cumulative force of them like throughout the book that just creates this atmosphere of like unease and like weirdness and like what the fuck. So I like that. I like that aspect of the book. There's a lot of other stuff, again, like I can't really talk about, but I will say I was a little underwhelmed by this book. I'm overall gonna give it a B-. Hold on, let me get a sip, because you know I grew a fresh cup of coffee. God forbid you wait 5 seconds, for real. I hate a motherfucker tell me to stop sipping coffee while I'm doing this video, even though no one's told me that before. Overall, I do have to give this book like somewhere around like a B-, give or take. And that's because honestly the big critique is I felt like the pacing was very like kind of like slow. Like the things that do happen are crazy, but everything in between that is kind of like not a whole lot happens. And she's like, and this is why I almost think like her short stories work so well and the novel or novella kind of like didn't. But and it's also, she's a little like over descriptive. Like you walk into a room and she describes all the furniture and where everyone's sitting and they're making a meal, and it's like, we use these ingredients and this dish, like that kind of thing. But like, you know, and like to her credit, I do think part of like the Shirley Jackson effect is the fact that you're reading like this very like nonchalant stuff, and then it's just like juxtaposed with like this extremely jarring detail that just like comes out of nowhere. So like you kind of need the contrast, but just in general. Up next, we have Twilight of the Idols and the Antichrist by Friedrich Nietzsche. So this is technically 2 books, but as you can see, it's like kind of small. So they're combined for that reason, and in part also because they're thematically related. And they both were written in the last half of what ended up being the final year of like Nietzsche before he went clinically insane. So one of the big takeaways I got from the book, like one of the most interesting ideas I got from this, was Nietzsche's like conception of morality. where he basically embraces all aspects of human nature, including like the so-called bad stuff. But he gives an example of like jealousy. He says we often try and like suppress feelings of jealousy, but you can extend this to all like the vices, all the immoral vices, all the bad things, right? Like anger, envy, greed, hatred, whatever. Hold up, sip break. But he basically gives the example of like, okay, yeah, we often try and suppress feelings of jealousy, but then he like poses the question like, why do we actually do that? Why do we deny the feelings of jealousy when they emerge and are just as valid as any of the other more noble aspects of morality? He has a great line about this. He says, we no longer admire dentists who pull out teeth to stop them from hurting. So like by extension, like there's a sort of like psychological unhealthiness and imbalance to the idea of like the idea that you'd pull out the teeth of your emotion. The idea that you would deny what are in reality just like natural and organic and universal feelings and aspects of human nature, right? So, and he gives another example basically like when we do deny these instincts, he compares it basically to menageries of animals, where he's basically like circus animals and shit, basically, where it's like they've been tamed and therefore improved, but when you see these animals in their cages, they're sickly and miserable and full of fear and low-key like pathetic. And he argues we're doing the same thing with ourselves when we like use morality to deny again what ends up being a very significant portion of like just real natural human nature. So I thought that was an interesting idea. And he has another idea, or he kind of arrives at this idea by through his critique of Christianity, which is like another huge part of this book. With that, he basically starts from like the beginning. He's basically like Christianity is completely based on the belief of God. And also another important part is he believes and will argue that all of Western morality is like in some way or shape or form influenced by the Christian, like some version of the Christian religion. So all of and even if you are like so-called atheistic, he would say like the things that you still think are moral and immoral are historically rooted in like the Christian conception of sin. So, but he says like obviously the whole thing stands or falls with the belief in God. So when you get rid of that foundation, the entire structure, the entire moral structure of Christianity, and he would argue by extension Western morality, completely just comes crumbling down. And he basically says morality was invented by the church to make so that mankind could become accountable. He says, he has a great line, this is another great line. He said, Christianity is a hangman's metaphysics because it was invented so that man could become guilty and therefore punished by like the larger church. He literally calls Christianity and like the idea of sin like levers of power by which you can lead mankind by the nose. And by the way, if you're not getting these quotes that I'm dropping, like Nietzsche is a fantastic writer, but we'll get into all that. But there's like a lot that's actually covered in this book. It's very large in scope, but I would say those are some like the big ones. But overall, I'm gonna give it an A+ because like for one, again, like I just mentioned, the writing is like brilliant. It's truly like Nietzsche is a very passionate writer. He's a very radical writer. Bro goes straight savage mode. Like I've never seen someone go like it truly is savage mode. Bro went absolute beast mode on so many different things, like so many different countries and authors and philosophers. Like he is taking shots, bro. But let me set this down to demonstrate for you 1 second. The idea that Nietzsche has is like written in aphorisms, like little sections, and these are kind of long on the longer end, low-key. But like yeah, like little aphorisms. So anyway, hold on, let me get the doobie back. I can't be, yeah, none of that. But yeah, overall I'll give this like an A+. The lowest I'll go is an A. I don't even necessarily agree with everything, but bro, is a pleasure to read. So up next, after the sip of coffee, hold on, I was just talking like a motherfucker. Take a sip yourself if it really bothers you that much. But up next we have, oh god, yeah. Up next we have the Quran, but I guess you would say either Muhammad, but really if we want to kind of be technical, Allah himself, because as my introduction states, for Muslims the Quran is the infallible word of God, and except for a very select few verses in this book, the speaker throughout is in fact like Allah. So for the record, because I have the Penguin Classics here, it's a great cover by the way, and I did not read it according to how Penguin organized it, because Penguin, what they do low-key is they basically just put all the best surahs first and leave the worst for last. Because I have full intentions of reading this book, I wanted to read this like according to the traditional sequence of the surah. So everything I'm saying is based off of the first 100 or so pages of the traditional sequence, because I did in fact DNF this book. I could not get through it, and it's honestly a testament that I even got 100 or so pages, because this book is literally, and I want to be sensitive to the fact this is like a religious text, but I'm treating it like literature, like literally one of the most boring pieces of writing I've ever read in my life. It is basically just Allah repeating over and over and over and over and over and over. And if you're getting pissed, you can't even talk to me about that, bro. That's just I like, put it this way, I was getting like my blood pressure, and I'm not even joking about this, was like increasing, and I was like literally like clenching my teeth, because I swear to God, Allah, for the first 100 pages of the traditional sequence, it is just him repeating like down to the paragraph some variation of Allah is all knowing, everything is contained with Allah, Allah is all seeing, etc., like omnipotence. Islam is the true religion, and infidels are going to try and convince you otherwise, and unbelievers are going to perish in hell. There's literally nothing, like 99% of the first 100 pages, again, is like him just repeating that same thing, because in this book there is no, again, according to what I've read, so I don't know about the Penguin edition, but there's literally no element of story whatsoever. Like, at least with the Bible, which is boring as fuck and will get its own critiques, boring as fuck at times, but at least the Bible has like, it's got Adam and Eve and the 7 days of creation. There's like Noah's Ark and like all, like there's an element of story to it. None of that absolutely whatsoever in the Quran at all. And on top of, like, that's fine, right? I feel like I read a good amount of like Eastern meditation and like mystic and contemplative like philosophy and literature stuff, and that has no elements of story, but it's just written with spiritual insight. This has also absolutely none of that. Like, when I say it is him just repeating the same things over and over, I truly mean that. And for the 1% that he doesn't, it's like weird shit. Like, I don't even know how to say this, except it's like instructions, like rules and like prescriptions, and like I can show you better than I can tell you, but it's like the most random specific shit. But okay, for instance, a male shall inherit twice as much as a female. If there be more than 2 girls, they shall have 2/3 of the inheritance, but if there be only one, she shall inherit the half. Parents shall inherit 1/6 each if the deceased have a child, but if he leave no children and his parents be heirs, his mother shall have 1/3. If he have 2 brothers, his mother shall receive 1/6 of payment after of his debts, blah, 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 blah. It's like the most random, like, the thing that stood out to me is like the idea that the creator of the universe would be like wasting his breath on the nitty gritty logistics of splitting inheritance is just crazy. And it's like, there's, again, like a nice little 1% of the book is just random shit. Like women, after they've been, like, divorced women can't get with another man until exactly 3 menstrual cycles. Like, there's so many weird rules. And it's like, that was the most interesting part of the book, because it was literally just him not repeating the same things over and over. And I'm going to stay out of the whole discussion of like the actual religious content. Like I said, I'm agnostic to that. But just as Big Nate speaking here, personally, man to man and woman, or non-bite, you get what I'm saying, bro. To person, jeez. It's a little like suspect when because again, this is the infallible word of God, and he speaks in 3rd person, by the way. It's a little suspect when he says something like the following: men have authority over women because Allah made one superior to the other. Good women are obedient. They guard their unseen parts because Allah has guarded them. As for those from whom you fear disobedience, send them to beds apart and beat them. So I'm not even going to touch that. And look, I'm not even trying to be a dick about this whole thing. I don't like when people like bash religion and just think they're so high and mighty. So obviously I know there's something of spiritual value in the Quran. I'm just saying I'm talking about my experience. So in fact, recommend me some of the actual surahs that you think I ought to read. So F, right? That was a DNF, so that was an absolute failure, if I'm just being honest. But up next, we have Atomic Habits by James Clear, which I'm going to get into in another sip of coffee, bro. Shit. You understand what it takes to talk as much and as long as I do? Sometimes I need just a little sip break. Matter of fact, I'm taking another one. Okay, up next, we have Atomic Habits by James Clear. And this is one of those like weird, it's like a self-improvement book. So it's like, you know, Big Nate, why did you actually put this in here? I found that this book had a real impact on just how I think about how I live my life, and has stuff that to this day that I really like implemented, and I would say like has like kind of, I guess you would say like changed my life. I don't want to use that too not what's the opposite of sparingly, but anyway, the core insight of Atomic Habits is the idea that basically most of your behavior and like what you get, like the substance of what you do in life is determined by your habits. He has a great line. He says, you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of the systems. And it's the idea, it's like it's great to have like passion and inspiration and to act on that, like of course, but the stuff that really happens in your life is what you are doing on a day-to-day basis. And like that's another part of Atomic Habits, is the idea that habits work over time. They're cumulative. So like the atomic part of Atomic Habits is the idea that even if you do something for like, whoa, what am I, bro, I haven't been smoking, holy shit. But the idea that if you do something for like even just 10 or 15 minutes a day, if you do it over time, like that's the idea of the habit. If you do it over time, that ends up actually being like I'm talking like, several months, year, 2 year, 5 years. But if you do it every day, that ends up being like a profound amount of time that you dedicate towards something. He says habits are the compound interest of self-improvement, or for that matter, self-destruction, because there's a lot on like bad habits too, which unfortunately I was not trying to hear because he had some good points on that, which I didn't like. But but one of the things I like too about the book is the way that he ties habits into like identity. He says the process of building habits is the process of becoming who you are, some shit like that. Oh my God, I just dropped the whole, when you like dropped it, but it's the process of becoming like who you are. And it's like, and there's a great quote, not in this book, which is why you need to come to Big Nate's book reviews, some of the best book reviews, because I got, but Annie Dillard has a quote where she says, how you spend your days, of course, is how you spend your life. And that really that's where habits come into like the identity. This is the type of shit you are doing on a day-to-day basis. It's really fundamentally who you are. And he has he makes the point, which I really agree with, that it's like, it is very important to just like sit down, evaluate your life, and like think about the type of person who it is you want to be. And then you can like use habits, and particularly there's a lot of good like practical advice in this book to get there. So, and again, it's something I have been incorporated into my like daily practice, and like I still, when I'm trying to get up off my ass and do shit, it's like this is the book that I use his instruction from. So the core insight, yeah. Oh shit. I'm a mess, bro. But the core insight of this book, I give an A+. The book itself, I give a B+, which is still quite good. And in fact, like I recommend it, but okay. Up next, we got Schopenhauer's Essays and Aphorisms. So this is basically a collection of like excerpts from what ends up being like Schopenhauer's larger works, and it's just on a range of like topics. So it's like philosophy and the intellect, ethics, law and politics, aesthetics, psychology, religion, thinking for yourself, suffering of the world, etc., etc., etc. The overarching theme of this book is basically like Schopenhauer's pessimism and his focus on suffering. So like the quote right here by Carl Jung on the back, Schopenhauer was the first to speak of the suffering of the world which visibly and glaringly surrounds us. And Schopenhauer is known for being like the bro, he really did the quote with this and his other food too. I did that without even thinking, but he's like the pessimist of philosophy. And part of that is going to come through, which, for instance, when I read the first line of the first page of the first paragraph, the very beginning of this book. If the immediate and direct purpose of our life is not suffering, then our existence is the most ill-adapted to its purpose in the world. The spirit of pessimism is the thing which ties the whole book together. But like, just on the same page, just as we are conscious not of the healthiness of our whole body, but only of the little place where the shoe pinches, so we think not of the totality of our successful activities, but of some insignificant trifle which continues to vex us, bro. We don't think about all the shit that's going right in our lives. We just think about where the little shoe pinches, bro. But so he said, no rose without a thorn, plenty of thorn without a rose. And I'm pretty sure that's like a whole line, because this book is also aphorisms, like the little short sections. And in fact, Nietzsche was very inspired by Schopenhauer. But it is worth pointing out, Schopenhauer is what we would call not a good guy. Put it this way, he threw a woman down the stairs, begrudgingly like dragged the court date out and paid her like the absolute minimum, and just in general is like not a good guy. And that is also shown by the fact that there's a chapter on here called On Women, which is probably one of the most sexist things I've ever read. But this is something worth pointing about Schopenhauer, is although I agree not with a word of what he says in that chapter, the writing itself is brilliant. Like, I'm underselling sort of like how much this book actually had an impact on me. So like, I'm gonna say it's an A+. And again, he is a writer who, as a writer myself, I like aspire to. And again, his chapter on women is like reprehensible. It's almost like comically bad, and I don't agree with any of it. But like, it is. I'm man enough to admit that is like beautifully written. Like, I am still just eating that shit up. So A+ to Schopenhauer. Cannot wait to read more. But okay, there you have it, folks. Those are some books I've read over the past weeks and months. Let me know if you've read any of these. Let me know what books I should read, and give me some traditional sequence of the surahs of the Quran. I'm not even capping about that. And thank you for watching Big Nate's Book Reviews, home of the best book reviews.